You know that deep-seated feeling that you're just less likely to experience negative things, like a divorce or an illness or an accident, and more likely to experience positive ones, like a great career. Well, that isn't just a personality trait. It turns out it's a fundamental, measurable error in how your brain predicts the future. So today, we're going to show you the exact filtering process in your brain that warps your perception of risk, and, more importantly, how to plan more realistically around it. Now, this is a huge statement because it completely reframes what optimism is. It's not just some feel-good mindset. It's a predictable, observable error in the way your brain processes information. Neuroscientists can actually see this glitch in brain scans. It's basically part of our standard operating equipment.
And this all leads to a really fascinating paradox. On one hand, this bias is amazing for us. It works like a psychological immune system, shielding us from the kind of fear and anxiety that would be paralyzing if we faced reality head-on all the time. It keeps us motivated, but, and this is the big but, that exact same protective shield is the direct cause of some of our biggest blunders in life. In our finances, our health, our careers, you name it.
So that's the big mystery we're going to unravel here. Why would we evolve a brain that systematically filters out reality? A brain that seems to care more about making us feel good than showing us what's true? Well, the answer is this incredible and honestly slightly terrifying story about survival, motivation, and the shortcuts our minds take to protect us from, well, ourselves.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the very real cost of this bias. Then we'll look right at the brain's filtering mechanism and the deep evolutionary reasons it's even there. And most importantly, we'll wrap up with 3 super practical tools you can use to work around this bias. And finally, we'll reframe the whole idea of hope versus planning.
All right, let's just dive right into the real-world consequences. Because while being optimistic feels good, the things it makes us do, or more often not do, can be incredibly costly. This isn't just some minor personality quirk. It has tangible, sometimes even devastating effects on our lives.
And I bet these failures sound really familiar. First up, you've got the planning fallacy. That kitchen renovation you swore would take 3 weeks, and it ends up taking 3 months? Or the business plan that goes way over budget? That's it. Next, we ignore health risks, thinking, that won't happen to me. We put off going to the doctor or just ignore good advice. And then there's our finances. We don't save enough for retirement because we're just so sure we'll be making more money later. And here's the kicker. All this inflated optimism often leads to paralysis. We just put off doing the important stuff today because our brain has us convinced that the future is going to work out. No problem.
So what is going on in the brain that causes all this? It really comes down to something called the PFC prediction error. Your prefrontal cortex, the PFC, that's the part of your brain making judgments, updating your beliefs. And what researchers have found is that when you get negative information about your own future, like say your personal risk for a disease, your PFC just doesn't really react, it barely fires up. But when you get good news, that same area lights up like a Christmas tree. Your brain literally resists letting the bad news in.
And this is just a brilliant illustration of how personal this bias is. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to spot the risks in a friend's plan? You can tell them, hey, that business idea sounds a little shaky, or you should probably get that checked out. But when it comes to our own lives, all that objectivity just goes out the window. This double standard proves it's not that we don't understand risk, it's that we have this dedicated firewall built to protect our own ego.
Okay, so let's see how this all builds into a complete system, a loop that's running in the background all the time, constantly filtering your reality to keep you feeling positive and in control even when you're really not.
Here's how that loop works. First, a piece of information has to trigger a self-reference. The question, is this about me? If the answer is yes, the filter kicks in. We just talked about it. The brain automatically discounts the negative stuff and welcomes the positive. Now, the immediate reward for this is huge. You get a nice hit of dopamine for thinking about a positive future, and you get to avoid all the anxiety that comes with facing a threat. And the result? Inflated optimism and, you guessed it, a delay in taking action. And that just reinforces the whole loop.
Let's put a formal name on that filtering process, because it is really the heart of the matter. It's called asymmetrical updating. Asymmetrical just means unbalanced. So think of your belief system like a bouncer at a club. It enthusiastically waves in all the good news, come on in, but when the bad news shows up, it slams the door in its face. And this isn't a conscious choice we make, it's an automatic process designed to keep our self-image positive.
So when your brain gets new information about you, the response is just dramatically different depending on what it is. Positive data gets this huge reaction. Our beliefs update, we feel great, we feel motivated, but the negative data, it gets a tiny, minimal response. The brain pretty much says, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And our sunny, optimistic belief stays exactly where it was. This is that neurological error in action.
Okay, so we have covered the what and the how. But now we get to the most important question. Why? I mean, if this bias causes so many problems, why is it hardwired into our brains? The answer is all about its deep evolutionary benefits for our motivation, our mental health, and frankly, our sheer survival.
So the key thing to get is that this bias isn't really a bug, it's a feature, and it serves these critical functions. It drives our motivation by giving us a steady drip of what's called anticipatory dopamine. That's the chemical that makes you want to get up and chase after goals. It protects our fragile sense of self from the constant threat of failure. I mean, can you imagine if you knew the true statistical probability of failure for every single thing you tried? It would be exhausting, paralyzing. So this bias saves our mental energy for taking action. And ultimately, it makes us resilient. It's what allows us to get up and try again after we fail.
So, we can't get rid of this bias, and honestly, we probably shouldn't. But we can learn to manage it. So this next part is a practical user manual. I'm going to give you 3 concrete strategies you can use to bypass your brain's filter and actually plan more realistically, all without killing your sense of hope.
All right, tool number 1 is called decoupling. It's a simple but really powerful mental trick. Remember how the bias gets triggered when we think about me? Well, decoupling works by just shifting the subject. You move it away from me to a more objective third-party version of you. So instead of asking, what are the chances I'll fail at this, which immediately puts up that emotional firewall, you ask, what are the chances that someone with my exact profile and situation would fail? This little shift lets your rational brain analyze the odds without the self-defense system kicking in.
Tool number 2 is a structured exercise called the pre-mortem. This thing is fantastic for any big project, whether you're launching a company or just planning a party. The process is really simple. Before you even begin, you get your team together and you all operate from one single, powerful assumption.
You just state that clearly. Okay, everyone, this project has already failed. Why? By forcing yourself to imagine that failure is a done deal, you completely sidestep the optimism bias. Suddenly, your brain's job isn't to protect you from the possibility of failure, its job is to explain the failure that hypothetically already happened. And this just frees you up to generate a whole list of very real, very plausible risks that you can now actually plan for.
And the third tool is specificity. See, the optimism bias loves to live in the vague, abstract future. Things like, I'll get in shape soon, or I'll definitely save more money next year. Those statements feel good, but they don't require any action. The antidote is to focus only on the minimal viable action, or MVA. What is the absolute smallest, most concrete, immediate step you can take? So instead of some vague hope, you create a specific action. This anchors your plan in the real world, right now, not in some rosy, imaginary future.
And all of this brings us to our final, and maybe most crucial distinction. The goal here is not to become a pessimist. It is to learn how to separate the feeling of hope, which is absolutely essential for our well-being, from the act of planning, which has to be grounded in reality.
If you take one thing away from this, let it be this. That feeling of confidence you have, that deep belief that you're going to succeed, that is a tool your brain is using to keep you moving forward. It's the fuel for your engine, but it is not the map for the journey. The map has to be drawn with objective data, with careful risk assessment, and an honest look at what could go wrong. You need both. You need the fuel and the map to get where you're going.
So really, the challenge is to hold 2 ideas in your head at once. Embrace the optimism that gives you the courage to even start. Protect that feeling. But when it's time to actually make a plan, have the discipline to set that feeling aside for a moment. Use these tools, decoupling, pre-mortems, specificity, to build a strategy that's strong enough to work even if your optimistic feelings turn out to be wrong. It's about planning for the worst while still hoping for the best.